Welcome to the Kingscrusher radio show. This is Tuesday, 9:10. So we're going to be looking at another. Let's mute that. We're going to be looking at another two amazing games of Garry Kasparov. So the first game I'd like to show you this evening is against Ulf Andersson. This was in 1985. Now, Ulf Andersson actually became a very, very hyper-positional player, but in 1985 he was still he was very aggressive originally, as far as I'm aware. But let me read you his wiki. So Ulf Andersson, Sweden. He was Swedish champion in 1969, awarded the IM title in 1970 and the GM title in 1972. During 1972 to 82 period, he was in the world's top 10, so world top 10 around here, and he had first prizes at Belgrade 1977, Buenos Aires 1978, Hastings 1978-79, Phillips Madrid 1980, 1982, and there's a number of other achievements. He also drew a 6-game match with Mikhail Tal in 1983, that's 2 years before this game, and played top board in the second USSR versus Rest of the World match in 1984, and also led the Swedish Olympiad team during the 1970s and 80s. Okay, so yeah, let's have a look at this game then. So a great player, d4 from Kasparov. Kasparov playing white. And just skip that thing there. d4 from Kasparov. We see knight f6. c4, and after e6 actually we see, let's check this Lightbook preference. This is actually the third most popular move in Lightbook. Instead of knight c4, knight f3, just g3 actually, accelerating fianchetto development. So that's kind of interesting. Just add a gambit as well. Installed. Okay. So anyway, so we see d5. d5 I think is a logical move. Bishop g2, bishop e7, knight f3, pretty standard stuff. And now here usually castles is played. Kasparov played actually queen c2. This is also very popular. And black actually took on c4 here. Quite often black plays c6 or even c5. But taking on c4 was the third most popular move, it seems. White took immediately on c4. Now we see a6, bishop f4. Now this usually white just castles here. For example, this is a very popular continuation. There's been thousands of games from this position. This idea is actually bishop a5 to try and stop that playing c5. We get a very interesting idea actually. Mind you, here bishop actually goes to f4. Usually it doesn't usually play here. It's a sideline because there's knight c6 there. So we'll quick look at that. Knight c6 here is different. e3. All right. Anyway, bit of trivia there. So anyway, yeah, casting is the move, as those variations show. But we see bishop f4 hitting, it seems, c7 actually immediately. Black played bishop d6. Now this is a little bit on the rare side compared to, there's another option, knight d5, just protecting c7 like this. Which has been used quite a bit, for example like this, and then either b5 or knight takes f4. But we see in this game bishop d6, so that's one way of protecting c7. Knight e5, knight d5 now, and the question is about this bishop. Does it really want to move, or can we have double pawns here? Kasparov actually chooses knight c3. So he doesn't mind losing the dark square bishop, doesn't mind the double pawns. He's going to have a bit of pressure, surely, down the c-file So we have knight takes f4, g takes f4. So yeah, it's an interesting position here. You might think, is this knight a bit of a pain? Can it be kicked? We see knight d7. If we look at a move like f6, I'm not sure that works too well. Well, just knight d3 doesn't really achieve that much. Okay, so it's tolerated there for a moment with knight d7, and we have actually just a supportive move here, e3. I think there might be something about this position where e3 is one of the better moves, just to hold f4 stronger. If castles, I think the point is queen h4. And the thing is about e3 now, this might be going somewhere. There's a problem here, which Kasparov must have seen. Ingenious, absolutely. Can you see in this position after knight takes, there's a problem. D takes, there's a problem here, guys, which might explain Kasparov's e3. Black to play. I'm telling you, there's a problem here. What can black play? This is a variation. It seems as though e3 is was necessary early. So black to play here. Anyone spot it? Black to play here. Spot a slight issue with the position. Yeah. Yeah. Important little nuances here. So this is why it seems maybe e3, it's important not to just castle because of this. Yeah. Okay, so hawk-eyed, e3, hawk-eyed move. And white retains a small edge with this move for the moment. Queen e7. White castles. Yeah, black's got a bit of congestion over here. How does he actually get his pieces out here? He plays rook b8 to try and maybe play b5, you might think. If that's too ambitious, it might be a bit too ambitious actually because of the c6 square. If we get b5, he gets the rook out of the firing line, that's for sure. But the continuation after is not so clear. We see knight e4, and yeah, harassing this bishop. His bishop's not really going anywhere. But instead of taking it now, we see knight c5. So we've got this double knights, double trouble on nice outpost squares. So it seems white hasn't really done anything too clever, but has a kind of visually aggressive position. But technically black's solid here. Technically though, this bishop is blocked in. It's blocked in at the moment without too much getting out. I mean, I think a move like b5 is too much. We see c6 actually, which is actually the engine's recommendation. I think if we go crazy with b5, this is just doing damage to black, this position. I think it's just doing damage. Well, we can take that for a start. What can black do here? Queen e8. It looks passive. Looks passive. Okay, so there's no point playing b5. So c6 was played, blunting the bishop. And maybe it also supports d5 for a knight, so it's not so bad an idea. b4, and here it looks as though there's a classic minority attack. This minority of pawns is hitting the majority of pawns to try and cause some structural damage. After king h8 we see a4 with the idea b5. It's a classic minority attack, but with a difference that these dominating knights here, quite aggressive knights, but the minority attack nevertheless to try and fracture pawns. Okay, so we see knight d5 blunting the bishop, but white continues b5. This does provide the ability to kick that knight though with f6. Goes back, a takes, and you see white has fractured black's pawn structure. This isolated pawn here. Is that enough to win this game? Okay, we see rook d8, And now rook a7 pinning that pawn. That pawn clearly is a bit of a target. Bishop takes c5. Knight takes c5. White has a pleasant enough position. Is it a big advantage though? Bishop d7. That's actually taken, and after rook takes d7, there's a nice little undermining move White plays here, which, well, it seems nice. Actually, it's not an engine choice or anything, but it seems nice. Can you guess what Kasparov plays? Kasparov to play. What would you play in this position? You know, you got your pressure on b7 and d5, right? Everything's pressurizing some light squares here. What would you do in this position to try and blast through intuitively? Any ideas? What would you play here? Any ideas? I want to try and blast through this position. White's play. Alright, I'll show you. F5. Yeah, just trying to undermine d5. Let's try to undermine this knight. Okay, so we see g6. Maybe there's a better move in knight c7 apparently, but even so, this is quite nice for white, this position, because the bishop's being cleared, right? b7 looks even more exploitable. Okay, so g6 was played though, which might be slightly worse. F takes. We still boosted this bishop a bit on the diagonal. Rook f a1. We see king g7. Queen b3. Black unpins tactically with knight f4, protecting the queen. That's actually taken. So this pawn is targeted. Knight d8. Bishop f3. We see rook c8. Now a great move, rook a5, with the idea of doubling like this. The thing is about this, this would not be good because of either rook b8 with a pin here or rook c7 with a pin there. So that would not be clever. So with this rook a5, instead sidestepping that sort of stuff, just the double rooks on b7, rook c7, and black's got a passive position. Is this enough to win this position? It's just one isolated pawn, one seemingly nearly exploitable target. f5 is played. You might wonder why. Well, let's just go with it. h4. Now this is actually an isolated pawn technically, and it can also try and do some sort of attack to try and weaken the majority. The minority attacking the majority again, trying to inflict some sort of structural concession. And in fact we see that here after king f7, the minority hits the majority with h5. Black waits, king comes up, now some pressure put on g6 laterally, rook f7, bishop kicks the rook. This one comes in, so actually some more pressure is being put here on all of these pawns. Rook e7, king g3, and in fact even more pressure could start to be put onto g6 potentially. But first it's fixed with hg. This is the time to fix it, and the king walks into f4. The knight is also, by the way, dominated by the bishop in this position. So the rooks are simultaneously looking at two targets now. Well, this one, b7 and g6, with the king coming to lend a hand with king g5. Yes, it's the big threat in this position. King g5 is the threat. Black is seemingly a little bit helpless here. If he plays a move like knight c6, this wasn't played, then I think we're getting a sort of zugzwang here after king g5. I think, because if knight e7, I think we could just snap. No, actually, even better than taking on b7, just bishop e6. Where's the rook going? And then it breaks down. Yeah. So this position looks as though black's in as kind of zugzwang. If he has to play this, and we get a similar breakdown of black's position. Even if we lose d4 here, it's still better. Yeah, this is just hopeless. This position. King f6, knight g8. This position. End up winning material like this. Yeah, so it's approaching a zugzwang position. Black played actually rook c2, trying to counter-attack here. But now king g5 anyway, so we're on g6. Rook takes f2. Rook takes g6, which weakens, of course, f5. Bishop b3, hitting f5, lo and behold. So keeping the knight kind of out of the game, this bishop as well. And also rook g8 check is getting dangerous here. Black is mostly helpless. Black plays check, and we can see the king walk in. The threat here, well, includes actually just bishop e6. Is if white had another move, this is really bad. Black try something active. If he doesn't, I think he's dead in the water here. Example, just rook f1, bishop e6, rook e7. This position, we can play rook c5. That's quite crushing. Let's play rook c8, check after. Yeah, and black's at breaking point. This is desperate stuff. It's just winning for white. So yeah, black's at breaking point here anyway. So what we've seen so far is minority of pawns on this side of the board weakening that, and a minority, clear minority, weakening black's structure on the king side, and the king coming in is really quite crushing here. We see f4, e4, rook b2, e5. Now with e6 on the cards, this is mobile center pawns are usually pretty dangerous. Black can't play this. I think we can just simply, actually we can just simply take this. It doesn't matter about the rook because there's mate here. You know, it takes, we just mate. So black tried f3, but even so e6, and after after f2, this pawn looks actually quite dangerous, but there is a move here which wins. Can you see the final winning move at move 50? White's play. So white's play here. Any ideas? What does white want to do here? So this pawn's pretty critical, but there's this move which is enough. Any ideas? Not rook g8, by the way. Not rook g8. Just king takes. It's not doing anything. Pawn's queening soon. If check here, this looks, after king f8 there's nothing. That's pretty bad actually. No, the move here is just to stop the pawn with bishop c4, and it doesn't matter about black's options, it seems, after this. If black resigned, if he takes, let's have a look at this position. Well, if here we just play e7 checkmate, if rook c7, bishop d3, yeah, this is actually stronger than, I think this is stronger than this. Because black might have a trick here to play this and then rook f7. But there's actually a stronger move here to avoid that trick. Sorry, on rook c7. White can play bishop d3. I think black's in a zugzwang here. If he moves the rook, there's e7 still and rook g8. If he plays rook e7, I think we just, actually we've got a nice thing here to do rook g8. King takes, and this is winning. This position, this pawn's too dangerous on e6. Yeah, it's going to be winning the knight. Well, we're going to squish the knight. So yeah, anyway, so it was after bishop c4 that black resigned this game. Okay, it's a bit of a positional game. I think some lessons to learn from the game. Well, Kasparov had great knights and he used the minority attack on this side to fracture, but then he used the h-pawn attack on this side to sort of fracture a bit, to leave g6 a bit weaker than it was. Now with g6 there's a simultaneous target, like two targets in the position g6 and b7. When the rooks established themselves like on b6, b5, there were two targets and the king came and overwhelmed black there. It was a great positional game, and you notice also the control of black's knight. Black's knight was pretty stuck for most of the game. Okay, let's have a look at another game now of interest. Now this is against the computer, Mephisto computer, in Hamburg, 1985. Now, the Mephisto computer is related to the Rebel computer and Pro Dio engines, but not Mephisto automation. Richard Lang programmed parts of Chess Genius, which is a computer, before continuing on with the authorship of Mephisto. So Richard Lang. Okay, so Scitech they kind of, they're into robotics at the moment, with robotic stuff and other stuff as well, by the way, loads of stuff. So anyway, so the computer Mephisto, this is in 1985. This is actually quite an interesting attacking game, I think. So e4 from Kasparov, we see e5, knight f3, knight c6. Yes, Roy Lopez. I know we're sick of the Roy Lopez's because of the current world championship, which has just finished. The classical session. Bishop a4, but yes, bear with me, it is exciting. Yes, a Roy Lopez, d6, c3. Let's get past the standard moves of the Roy Lopez, which run deep. h3, pretty standard, 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 standard. Now here actually usually knight bd2 is played, but Kasparov took the interesting decision of immediately closing the center. This is actually quite rare to immediately close the center, but still, I mean, there's been quite a few games. One of the drawbacks might be the c5 square sometimes, if black can get a knight to c5 some way. Bishop d7, b3. Now already white is ready potentially to play b4 in the event of c4. So actually, you know, maybe even that move, c4 has been played a bit, but no, bishop d7 is actually pretty standard, still pretty standard here, except this next move is odd. It's not in the live book actually that much at all. This next move from black, it is a suspect computer move, computer move. So queen b6, it's odd. Yeah, it doesn't seem to have too much purpose. There's moves like knight b7, knight e8, rook fe8. Yeah, these are all like being played before. All of these. So okay, queen b6 looks a little bit on the odd side. Knight bd2, and it looks as though this is following a standard plan you might think of, you know, just getting a knight over here, or knight e3, rook fc8, so the knight comes over here, and black plays h6. We see bishop e3, and black's not really doing much. I don't think black really understands this closed position. I think that's why Kasparov, well, at this time in 1985, computers wouldn't be understanding the closed positions that much. So we see queen d2, and yeah, we've got this battery on h6. We've got some pressure building up here. Knight h7, knight g3, and it looks as though, in fact, White's trying to expand his light square bishop, coming in with knight f5 soon. It's like this build up on the king side. We see, you know, actually all of these pieces are actually potentially aggressive. Rook ab8. In fact, White does play knight f5. So his black takes, actually. It doesn't wait with bishop f8. So it gives White something now. This light square bishop might be powerful in the future after e takes. There's a bit of a bind. g4. Now, clearly, being run over doesn't look too happy. So knight h7, trying to keep control of g5. King g2. Rook b7, and White just builds up here behind the pawns, puts his rooks more ideally placed for any g5 break later. Computer's not doing anything, computer's just waiting around. Actually, this is quite amusing to see these computer games in 1985, because it also shows, it sort of answers the question, what would Kasparov do if he had a few spare moves in terms of an attacking formation? What would he do with the royal pairs? So this is the answer. If black's not doing a thing, because black's computer just looking short term all the time, doesn't really understand this pawn break which is being built up here. So king f1, and actually it's not even about g5 here, it's about squishing Holskull with h4 and then maybe g5. We see rook d7, but in fact, although h4 is tempting, here after rook d7, Kasparov is actually tempted to just try and immediately break through with g5. Yeah, I think h4 is pretty dangerous as well, actually, because we can try and squish with this, and even if we lose d5, it's not a big deal. We get a really good position. So this is already, it's dangerous, this position, but g5 before black has time to maybe hit b5. hg, knight takes g5. Queen b7, yes, looks at d5. Yeah. Well, there's a shocker. Yeah, I don't know how many of you have seen this game. It's a shocker. So it looks as though black's on the way to undermining White's center. So was this break with g5 a bit premature? Was it actually needed? There's something really exciting about this position. Okay, so White's play. Can you guess Kasparov's move? And I'll give you 200 points, virtual points, if you can see White's move here. Wow. In fact, I just want to point out, you know, we've got lots of attacking pieces here for black's king. In fact, they're all kind of in a great place potentially for black's king. This is out of the way, this is a bit out of the way. Yeah, these guys are all in a sort of attacking positions. There's actually two really killer moves here which could have been played, but let's look at Kasparov's. It's really fascinating. Can you try and guess Kasparov's? Okay. A bit more time. It's an amazing move. Any more votes? If you watch this later on YouTube, you might want to pause the video and find this amazing move. It's staggering. Maybe it's one of the most brilliant moves Kasparov's ever played against the computer, actually. Here goes. Knight e6. Wow. Okay, first things first. Let's look at about this d pawn, if that's just ignored. We've got rook takes g7 check. This is no good for black because rook takes f7. We've got that knight entrenched here, free of charge. We're now playing things like f6 or rook g1. It's pretty diabolical. E.g. this f6. It's bishop moves. It's going to be crunch time while we win the rook. It's winning material anyway. Knight takes f6. Say f6 is meant to be a good move here because in this position we retain this bishop. Play h4 followed by bishop g5. Black's in loads of pins here and he's getting murdered. Now the threat is rook takes e7 and bishop f6. This is just murder. This can't be tolerated, basically, to play queen takes and then our rook takes g7. In that scenario just we've witnessed, in that possible scenario, the act of taking g7 and f7 leaves this nasty pin. And then, yeah, things like this will accentuate the pin. It's no good. And on knight takes d5, rook takes g7, even worse. Because white here can play rook here, with the threat of takes and mate here, for example. It's hopeless for black's king safety. Yeah, that, you know, if takes... In fact, we can even just take here. And we're threatening mate. That's the thing about that one as well. If here, that's just desperate. Yeah. If anything else, we just play bishop takes or bishop d4, just threatening queen h6. So no, this is intolerable. It's got to be taken. It's got to be taken. Well, there's one other possibility, g6. Let's examine g6. On g6, probably the most crushing move is actually to put the knight back. It seems. No, hold on. Maybe the knight can be kept there with bishop h6. This might even be better. So it takes. We can play rook takes. Queen g5. And we get this position. I think black's defenseless here. Okay, it's only a double rook sack. It's a computer line. It's a double rook sack, but here black is pretty defenseless because, yeah, we've still got loads of attacking pieces. If bishop f8, it's a mate in 14. Check. Bishop takes. Yeah, it's hopeless. You see, that's hopeless. So yeah, it seems that on g6 we have bishop h6. Just to run that through again. So if queen takes d5 here, seemingly biting back at the center, yeah, we have rook takes g6. This position is hopeless because here, as another example, instead of taking, there's knight g5, bishop g7, bishop f6. If ever this is take, well, we can just take the queen anyway. Yeah, so that's pretty hopeless anyway. g6 is hopeless. It seems the strongest move that the engine finds is bishop h6. That's actually quite a fascinating line, I think, with the double rook sack. Being able to sack this one and this one for that position, that is hopeless. Let's just check that again. That's pretty spectacular. This is Houdini finding this, by the way. Houdini engine finds this. This position here with king f7 is, that's just the mate in 1 there. Yeah, it's all mating. It's all mating. Okay, yeah. So anyway, so knight e6. So we've ruled out taking or g6, but no, actually taking was the game continuation. No, what I mentioned was on queen takes d5. We mentioned queen takes, knight takes, or g6, but actually taking was the game continuation. It was just taken. Now Kasparov just took casually with the f pawn. It opens up the bishop, and there's still this issue. Well, the rook's attacked here, and in fact the best move might be to try and give up the rook technically with queen takes, which is just better for white after e takes. That's simply better for white. There's no time to take here because it's check. If here, this is simply better for white, this position. But the computer wanted to move the rook here. But now we do have a really brilliant continuation anyway, as well, in the game. It's actually a forced... There's actually a forced mate in 9, apparently. This is a forced mate in 9. This is quite a hard puzzle to set. So can you see can you see the mate in 9? Anyone? Can you see the mate in 9 here? What does it start off with? You might wonder. Any ideas? How would you start a mate in 9 here? $200 points if you can start the mate in 9. Alright, I'm going to have to show you. I hope you got time to look at that. Especially if you're on YouTube. That was at least more than 5 seconds. Alright. Rook takes. So that's a mate in 8, whatever black does. Black took here. That's the game continuation. If he plays king f8, we play bishop h6. And it's a mate in 7, whatever black does. If here, this accelerates the mate, so mate in 3. Double check. Check. Mate. If king e8, we got queen g5, threatening rook g8 here. This pawn is part of a mating net, really. Bishop f8, queen takes, and here, not here, here, there's queen takes f8, rook f7 double check, and it's going to be mate next move on king e8, or a mate in 3 if king j8 because the other rook gets involved. Here, bishop g7 checkmate because actually the bishops are all involved. Sorry, after this move, bishop f6 or bishop e5, both mate. So the bishops are involved here, the rooks are involved, the pawns are involved in fact. So that was on king f8. It's all mating after king f8, bishop h6, all mating. So I showed you queen d5 and king e8 there. On knight e4, just for the record, we just take that, it's no big deal. Okay, so in the game though, we see king takes g7. Now it's a mate at 8. Kasparov plays bishop h6 check. We see king h8. But now a really great move here for a mate in 7. So white's play here. Can you see white's move in this position? This must have been all very well calculated by Kasparov. White's play here, it's a forced mate in 7. White's play? What did you play here? To be fair, actually there's at least two really crushing moves. But the forced mate in 7 is what do you reckon the forced mate in 7 will be? Alright, I'll show you now. Bishop G7, so it means that the queen has got access here. Potentially, or this as well, we'll check. Now if King G8, then just immediately Queen H6. And we're threatening Queen H8. There's no defense here. It'll be mate next move, whatever happens. Whatever happens, it's mate next move. You know, if Knight H7, it's still mate next move, right? So the king takes. Then we see check here, mate in 5 now. King F8. The thing is, this pawn is the real killer, you know, after check. Here, we've got a back row mate pattern here, virtually. Just a more sophisticated version of a back row mate. At the moment, playing the check for the back row mate concept, black would be winning off bishop f8 here, believe it or not, because then the defensive troops come in there, end of white's attack. In fact, we could even sack now and save the king. The king can crawl out. That would be terrible. So Queen H8 check would be a mistake. Instead, we have a key delicate check on G6, putting the king precisely where we want it on D8. It's this location with E8 controlled by the bishop that now this is a truly killer check with mate in 2 to follow. The pawn is stopping that escape square. So if knight e8 we just mate, the mate in 2 it's just token resistance. Yeah. So after Queen H8 and that was it. Fun. In fact, there's quite a few interesting games in FISTO we should have a look at some point. Come to think about it. Yeah. Well, that was fun anyway, I thought. Okay, I hope you enjoyed these 2 games and got something out of them. In a nutshell, for this game, we get to be shown actually what Kasparov would play, in effect, if he had quite a few moves without the opponent doing anything meaningful. So there's an advantage of playing computers in 1985. You get to see the super GM plans without too much resistance, which would be just tearing the opponent's king to shreds. If 2 rooks needed to be sacked, whatever rook, it doesn't matter. Checkmate ends the game. Okay, comments, questions, likes, appreciated. Thanks very much and see you next week. Cheers then.